Well, folks, how are you doing this afternoon? So exactly what you want to do late in the afternoon after sort of the lunchtime Z's have kicked in is come here to the, what we used to refer to as the big blue bedroom when I was in the infantry advanced course. It's not blue anymore. Command Sergeant Major Davenport and I are honored to be here to speak with you. We're going to actually talk about a large array of things, and then he and I will open it up to Q&A, and then you can bombard us with everything. Wait till I bring up the Sergeant Major before you get the real hard questions. But we can talk about anything you want to talk about. He and I literally, our plane just landed. This morning we were at Fort Leavenworth talking to the pre-command course, and that is the battalion commanders, brigade commanders, and their command sergeant majors to be. So basically your next set of bosses. We've got them just about squared away, I think. Sergeant Major and I may have to go back one more time. There are a couple of them a little shaky. So we figured since we got all the battalion commanders, brigade commanders and their command sergeant majors squared away, we might as well come down here and square away all the platoon leaders and company commanders and first sergeants, et cetera, like that. And then our work in the Army will be done, and we can take a well-deserved break this weekend. So it's actually unique that he and I get to talk from brigade command all the way down to platoon in one day in echelon. And some of the things actually that he and I will talk about are probably similar, but then also we'll try to contextualize it down to your level so that it sort of has some relevance. So if you're in ABOLC, or if you're in one of the BOLCs, raise your hand. ABOLC, IBOLC. I just got to do an IPB and know where folks are. Okay, so all the lieutenants there. If you're on the captain's career course, where are you? Okay, well, so you guys already outnumber the lieutenants. And then over here, we have our great non-commissioned officers, I take it. I see a pattern developing. Okay, so I guess we're going by rank or something from your left to my right. Well, one of the things I want to focus on a lot, actually, is leader development, leadership in the profession. I'll talk about our command philosophy, and then, I can talk about the Army operating concept. If you want, Sergeant Major and I could spend all day here. And I know most of you want to do that, but he and I have other things to do. So you can send us an email on the global. I guess one of the things that actually I can proselytize a little bit here, so that you sort of understand the bigger picture of a number of things, and actually maybe it will spark some questions that you may want to ask the Command Sergeant Major myself. So one of the things when I was talking to the battalion and brigade commanders and their command sergeants majors is I try to give them some, tips of the trade, safety tips and things that they can sort of employ when they become leaders. I say one of the things leaders do is they contextualize the environment that they operate in, because sort of by design, leaders are the ones that are supposed to see the forest through the trees. They can look up or out and understand things that maybe people inside the organization don't, and provide a linkage. So one of the things I find, being the leader and the commander of training and doctrine command, is as I go around the Army, and actually as I go around the world, is I have to contextualize TRADOC. What is TRADOC? What is TRADOC for? Because a couple of things sort of jump out as I have been here. Now, you've heard the term talent management, right? That's kind of the term du jour and the term of art, et cetera, like that. And I say we want a broad range of experiences. So this is my first assignment in TRADOC headquarters. So this is my broadening assignment, okay? So everybody's going to get broadened. Lieutenants, captains, non-commissioned officers, four-star generals. We're all going to try to put you in a position that you've never been before, get you out of your comfort zone, et cetera, like that. And so this is my broadening experience. So, and one of the reasons we put you into a broadening experience to get you out of your comfort zone is because it forces you to learn things that you didn't know. And because otherwise, if you've been in the same job over and over and over, you're like, well, gosh, I've done this a million times, I know what it is. But when we put you in a place that you don't know much about, what you have to do is you got to kick into the self-development domain, which unfortunately, of the three domains for leader development, is probably the least utilized, and I would consider myself in that category until recently. So they said, hey, Perkins, you're going to be the TRADOC commander. I said, okay, where's TRADOC? And they gave me a strip map, so I show up there, et cetera, like that. So I start to contextualize what it's about. And a couple things jumped out at me. One, No other Army in the world has a training and doctrine command. Nobody else has a TRADOC, okay? Then I went around, talked to my buds in the Air Force, the Navy, Marine Corps, and they don't have a TRADOC either. So it does sort of beg the question, if no other Army has a TRADOC, and the Marines don't have one, the Navy doesn't have one, the Air Force doesn't have one, I mean, how important can it really be? You know, are they all wrong and we're right? Or are the Sergeant Major and I just excess overhead? You don't have to answer that quite yet. Okay, but it does kind of beg the question, well then how come only the Army has one? How come only the U.S. Army has one and no one else has one? Because none of those other organizations are going out of business. Okay, and there's other armies in the world that have done great. In fact, other armies in the world that have existed many times longer than the U.S. Army has, and they don't have one, so what's up with that? Well, so I started doing sort of some self-development domain stuff here and trying to figure out and say, well, first of all, why do we even have a TRADOC? What's a TRADOC for? And then kind of put that in context with regards to the Army, and then actually it becomes instructive to learn about the Army, which unfortunately too many soldiers, including myself, and to this day I'm learning a lot, really don't understand the Army. We understand our part of the Army, we just don't understand the Army. It's a very large and complex organization. So one of the other things that I tell leaders they have to do is they have to understand what they are for. Not just what they do, but what they are for. Because then once you understand what you are for, then you can sort of grade your homework on what you're doing. Because I always warn people in the Army, we have a bad habit of this, is sometimes we confuse doing a lot with getting a lot done. Don't confuse doing a lot with getting a lot done. We want you to get a lot done. The way that you get a lot done is you need to know what you are for, and therefore it lets you know whether or not what you are doing is moving you in the direction. So let me give you an example kind of disassociated from the world that you're in so that, if nothing else, I have your attention. So last week I was out on the West Coast in Silicon Valley, went to a number of places to try to think big thoughts and find better ways for the Army to innovate. So I went to Stanford, Naval Postgraduate School, Defense Language Institute, a bunch of other places. And one of the places I went was Google, okay? Google headquarters, because everyone thinks, when you think high tech, you think Google, right? It's a multinational, multi-billion-dollar organization, kind of like the Army, multinational, multi-billion. They have, you know, funky beanbag chairs and, you know, free chow in their cafeteria and these high-speed espresso machines. And, you know, it's just a great place to hang out. You just like hang out at Google headquarters and you feel really smart because all these smart people running around, you know, doing all kinds of stuff like that. So myself and some of my folks, we spent a better part of a day at Google and was talking to one of their vice presidents and some of their sort of project managers about stuff. And the first slide they showed us, I'm sure they generally don't do PowerPoint, but they heard we're in the Army and, you know, they heard Army guys like PowerPoint. So it kind of reinforced this thing about coming to grips with what you are for before you start doing something so you know what to do. And actually, Google has a great example of that. So they put up their first slide. It's a very poorly done slide. I mean, any self-respecting Army PowerPoint ranger wouldn't show it, but, you know, they're civilians, so we give them a break. You know, there were no clouds, no lightning bolts to speak of, no roads to Google or anything like that. But they did sort of have their vision, mission, what I would call the what are you for slide. And does anyone know what Google's vision statement is? Anyone know, ex-Google employees here? What Google's vision statement is, what their mission is, what they are for is to organize all the information in the world in an easily accessible manner. Period. Organize the world in an easily accessible manner. Now they do a bunch. They do a bunch. They have web pages, they have servers, they have advertisers, they're working on satellite stuff, they're doing all kinds of stuff, okay? But in their mind, what they are for is to organize all the information in the world in an easily accessible manner. But see, that's very powerful because now when somebody does something, they're like, hey, are you moving us in the right direction? So based on that, I said I could sort of see myself at the weekly Google command and staff meeting. Google 6 and all his staff officers are there. And I could see Google 6 saying, okay, I need an update, IPR. I need an update on what are we doing with medical information, because Remember, organize all the information in the world in an easily accessible manner. Medical information is part of it. What are we doing about medical information? And then, Google 3/8 is going to be the action officer. So Google 3/8 raises his hand. Hey, sir, here's what we're going to do. If you have like a medical condition, what you do is you sign on to the Google website, CAT card enabled, get your CAT card, put your PIN in, go into the Google website, you go to the front page. If you have a medical malady, you put down 10 symptoms, tab on down to page 20. If you're in prescription meds, you fill that out. Go to Annex A. If you get a doctor's second opinion, put that in there. Go to the last page and Annex Tango, fill out the HIPAA statement, boom, send that off to Google. And then what's going to happen is Google says, we're going to get all this information, we're going to sit down, verify the HIPAA statement was signed, and then we'll have a little medical evaluation board, and we'll figure out what's going on, then we'll get some information together, a couple of glossy trifolds, some CDs, whatever, put them in a packet, mail them off to you, you'll get information back in about 3 weeks. So Google 6, that's our plan. And I'm sure Google 6 will say, wait a minute, don't you understand what we are for? To organize all the information in the world in an easily accessible manner. That doesn't sound easily accessible to me. That sounds like AKO or something. So, no, don't take it personally if you work on AKO. So Google 6 might say, hey, how about this 3/8? How about if we have a web page with one line, just one line, and you type in anything you want, any medical malady, you can even spell it, leukemia, misspell it, boom, it'll autocorrect. Press the return key, and within 0.4 of a second, 100,000 hits. Is that easily accessible? Well, sir, I guess so. See, that is the power of knowing what you are for. Because then when somebody says, let's do this, you can say, why? Why do that? What is that for? How does that move me in the right direction? But just think about it, how powerful it is that Google has sat down and said, what are they for? Because Google, do they generate any new information? No, they don't make up stuff. They don't make knowledge. They don't generate information. Do they just deliver data? No. I mean, anybody could do that. There's a lot of ways to go get data, right? You could go to the Library of Congress, walk into the Library of Congress, and you're surrounded by knowledge, right? But it's not that accessible, right? Because then you got to go and you probably have a card catalog, you pull it out, Dewey Decimal System, I know I probably date myself, etc. So how come every time you have a question you don't run to the Library of Congress? Because it's not easily accessible. In fact, what Google says is they don't generate knowledge, they organize it. So Google, one of the largest capitalized companies in the world, they don't make knowledge, they don't generate knowledge, they don't deliver data, all they do is organize it. It's like a giant closet company. They're organizers. So all Google does is take everything else everybody else does, and they just organize it and make it easily accessible. That's all they do. And they're one of the biggest companies in the entire world because they understand what they're for. Because what they do move electrons. They do have advertisers. They do collate data and all that, but a lot of people do that. A lot of people do that. But nobody else organizes it in an easily accessible manner. So that's one of the things that I say leaders have to do. Well, actually anybody, but especially if you're a leader, which if you're an officer or non-commissioned officer, you are a leader. When you get to an organization, two things. What is my organization for? And what am I for? And therefore, based on what the organization is for and what am I for, figure out what you're going to do. And then always grade what you're doing against what you're for. So based on that, let me describe to you what TRADOC is for. Okay, and just use this as an example. You could do it at the platoon level or whatever. And I think, laser pointers up here? So here we go. Okay, so if you can put up the TRADOC slide if we have it in the deck. So first of all, this is a fairly sunny afternoon here at great Fort Benning, and you're all in Army training, so I want to make sure you get credit for an Army brief. To get credit for an Army brief, it must have a line of block diagram, okay? So here's a line of block diagram, so at least now you're all getting credit for an Army brief. Okay, so this is sort of a pictorial example of your United States Army Training and Doctrine Command, okay? Now, if you take a look at it, it's not exactly intuitive, okay? And it's like this huge Byzantine Empire. And I will tell you, this is like the tippity tip of the iceberg. This is just the very tip of the iceberg. And when you kind of take a look at it, you say, holy cow, I mean, just look at all the stars here. This thing has more stars than a constellation in the Milky Way. But I'm going to walk you through how it's organized and let you know what it's for, to kind of use that analogy at a different level. So up here at this level, this is the typical bloated headquarters of a 4-star general. So we're a T at a bloated headquarters. So that's doctrine. All 4-star headquarters will be bloated headquarters. So we're good at that. So Sergeant Major and I keep check on it. If it gets too small, we go ahead and hire some more people. Just to antagonize the subordinates. Because that's what we're for. Just ask them. Then we move left to right. Over here, we have the Army Capabilities Integration Center, otherwise known as ARCIC. They work on the future of the Army. They're under the great leadership of Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster, a former commander down at the Maneuver Center of Excellence. And what they do is they try to look to the future. We're looking 2025 to 2040. Describe what the future is, and then figure out what are the first order capabilities of the United States Army, and then they crank out the blueprint for the Army. So they design the future of the Army. In fact, as we speak, we have everybody almost that's here on this chart. All the senior leaders of Training Doctrine Command are getting here together at Fort Benning. We're all going to link up at the brew pub this evening, 1800, so come check us out if you want. You want to put a name to the face to this. And we're down here, we're going to run a war game on 2030 to try to design the future of your Army. So even as we speak, there's a whole bunch of, command star majors and 3 stars and 2 stars scurrying about to impress me with a briefing later tonight or something, I guess. So they work on the future of the Army. Then what we have is Asymmetric Warfare Group, Rapid Equipping Force. They work on sort of the emerging disruptive technologies out there. They were started up initially to deal with IEDs, and then we're doing subterranean stuff, and they're all over the world trying to get the latest and greatest that the enemy's trying to do to us. Then you come over to Combined Arms Center out at Fort Leavenworth, where Command Sergeant Major and I were just out at Fort Leavenworth, and what they do, unique enough, we've decided we're going to take all the elements of Combined Arms Team and put them under the Combined Arms Center. We didn't just jump to that conclusion. It took us a couple years to figure it out. So we have the Combined Arms Center, and they have underneath them all of the centers of excellence and all of the schools. They also do the Center for Army Lessons Learned. They have the CAD-D, which is Combined Arms Doctrine Directorate, Command and General Staff College, Sergeant Major's Academy, et cetera, like that. So what they do out at Fort Leavenworth is they do all the lessons learned. We have folks all around the world. They then they write the doctrine. They then run the school system that teaches the doctrine, and they are the proponent for leader development for the entire United States Army. Then you move down here, you have U.S. Army Recruiting Command. So when you go around the country, you see a strip mall, it says Armed Forces Recruiting Center. Say, hey, that's Training and Doctrine Command. Some of you may be TRADOC or Recruiting Command alumni. Then we have U.S. Army Cadet Command. In fact, our Major and I, we just did a thing with the Marshall Award seminar last night. We had the dinner, which are the top ROTC and West Point cadets. Many of you are a product of Cadet Command, so that's 76% of the Officer Corps. And then we have initial military training here, which is Major General Tony Funkhauser, and they do basic training, AIT, BOLC, et cetera, et cetera. So you stand back and say, wow, that really is kind of a Byzantine empire, and it seems to be kind of the island of misfit toys. I mean, it doesn't seem to be, there's no method to the madness. In other words, hey, kind of like everything nobody wanted to do in the Army, give it to Mikey, give it to TRADOC, and they'll just kind of honcho it around. Doesn't seem to be a method to the madness. I mean, we've got guys running basic training. We've got guys dealing with IEDs. We've got guys cranking out the future of the Army. We're training infantrymen and armor soldiers down here. Then over here, you got chemical guys. I mean, you guys are all over the map, TRADOC. Well, in fact, TRADOC is all over the map. TRADOC is located in 1,634 locations around the world. So it is kind of a large Byzantine empire. But it starts to make sense because what we do is, I'll kind of peel it back and you see the relationship. So I told you one of the monikers of TRADOC is we are the architect of the Army. We design the Army. And so Sergeant Major and I are down here with all of these leaders, and in the next couple of days we're going to be looking at 2030, running a war game. And what we do is we see what the future, we describe the future, then we come up with the first order capabilities that the United States Army has to have, and we crank out a blueprint. So we decide and work with folks, say, what do you want a division to do? What do you want a brigade to do? What about a battalion? Rewrite the requirements for the next attack helicopter, the next tank, the next mess kit, the next bayonet, whatever. We look at all of the organizations and all the material in the Army, write their first order requirements based on the future. In other words, we design the Army. And we're looking out to 2030 to 2050 right now, which may seem a long time away, but it's not that far from now. So we crank out a blueprint. So it's kind of like if you're building a house, right? You got to start off with a blueprint. You say, I want a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. So you can go to an architect and get a blueprint. You go to eplans.com and download it. And then you got to go get a contractor, right? I got the blueprint. Now I got to clear the lot, got to put the foundation in, get someone to run the power lines, plumber. Or you can do what's called a design build firm. It's one-stop shopping. You walk in the front door, say, I want a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. They say, we got architects, we got plumbers, we got concrete guys. We'll get you building permit, design build. You show up, 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. I got it. Come back in a year. We'll give you the key to the front door. That's what Training and Doctrine Command does for the Army. We are a design build firm. Okay? We design the Army, and then we start building it. And so if you're going to build an Army, what's the first thing you do if you're going to build a house? You go get the raw materials, right? You got the blueprint. Now I got to get my raw materials. So if you're going to build a house, contractor gets in his Ford F-150, drives to Home Depot, gets plywood, 2x4, sheetrock, screws, everything, right? Gets all the raw materials, brings it back. Well, that's what we do here. So these guys design the Army, and then Recruiting Command and Cadet Command go get the raw materials. An Army isn't full of people, an Army is people. So you are the raw materials. So we say, I need this many soldiers, I need this many officers, go get them based on the Army I designed. We go get them, boom, they back up the truck, dump it in the driveway of Training and Doctrine Command, say, here's your raw materials. I had the blueprints, here's the soldiers, lieutenants, some of them were on sale, President's sale, so we saved a little money on the raw materials here. Then, if you're a contractor, what would you do? You got to start building this thing. So what do? We give it to these guys. And we go, okay, I had the blueprint. These are the attributes and characteristics I want. Here are the raw materials, soldiers, lieutenants. Start building it. I send them to basic training. I send them to AIT. I send them to ABOLC, send them to Ranger School, Airborne School, whatever. We start building this thing. We lay the foundation. We get the structure intact. We get it looking like, kind of like an Army's supposed to look like. And then we hand it off to my battle buddy, General Abrams at Forces Command. He and I were just together at Leavenworth a little while ago. What Forces Command does is make ready the Army in unit sets. They make ready companies. They make ready battalions, brigades. They make ready the Army in unit sets. And then if the nation calls upon it, they give the Army to combatant commanders who fight it. But then the combatant commander may be fighting and say, you know what, I got some great captains, good staff officers. They're not ready to be a company commander yet. I got some great NCOs, not really ready to be a command sergeant major yet. So they give it back to the Army. They say, hey, your doctrine's okay, but it's not quite there. Now we got counterinsurgency. I need new doctrine. So they give it back to the Army and say, I want to improve it. And what we do, we take the captains and send it to the captain's career course. We take the lieutenants and send them to the captain's career course. Captains then go off to command. We take our non-commissioned officers, send them to our Majors Academy. Our majors go to Command General Staff College. We give them more lessons learned. We give them more doctrine. Hey, this doctrine's not working. Okay, boom, update the doctrine, rewrite it. We improve it. It used to be a 3-bedroom, 2-bath Army. Now it's a 4-bedroom, 4-bath Army. Add an extra car garage. We make it better. So the way this thing works is what happens is Training and Doctrine Command designs the Army, acquires the Army, builds the Army, and improves the Army. Forces Command makes ready the Army. Army Material Command sustains the Army, and combatant commanders fight the Army. That's a whole semester of the Army War College right there on how the Army works. So you're all going to get credit for a semester of the War College. Not that hard. So what TRADOC does is we design the Army, we acquire the Army, we build the Army, we improve the Army. Forces Command makes ready the Army, Army Material Command sustains the Army. So that's what TRADOC is for. Now we do a bunch. We run IBOLC, ABOLC, we run all kinds of non-commissioned officer education, we run Ranger School, Airborne School, we write doctrine, we run Command General Staff College, we do Center for Army Lessons Learned, we design tanks, we do a bunch. I could give you a whole list of things we do, but what we're for is to design, acquire, build, and improve. So when I look at Staff Sergeant Major, I look at it, we say, hey, is this helping design the Army? We're doing a bunch. Is it moving us toward the future, or is it moving us backwards? Because what TRADOC is about is the future. So we have to be improving the Army. Is what we're going to do improve the Army or make it worse? So that we can start grading our homework. So that's what TRADOC is for, okay? So if I gave you a list of everything we are doing today in all 1,634 locations, it'd probably be a very long list, okay? And we all have a to-do list. I tend to focus on one of my 4 lists because I get it down to 4 things. Now it's sort of manageable. There's 1,634 locations, but they're all involved in this. they're doing something about this. And if it's not doing this for the future, I'm thinking that's the first thing we stop doing. Well, that's the first thing we do differently. And in fact, that's why we're all here this next couple of days. Everybody, all of these folks, every general officer, command sergeant major, other leader in TRADOC, we are down here running this war game on 2030, and we're saying, hey, is how the Army's designed today, is that going to work in 2030? Are our attack helicopters, is that what we want in 2030? Are these tanks, are they what we want? Are these Bradleys what we want? Because if they're not, okay, if they're not what we want in design, we better improve the design. And then we better figure out how we're going to acquire and build this stuff. Are attributes of our leaders, are they what we want? Okay, or not? And then we got to come up with a .mil PF solution, a .mil PF solution. So TRADOC comes up with .mil PF solutions. As you know, that's doctrine, organization, training, leader development, material, personnel, facilities, et cetera, like that, .mil PF solution. And so the first aspect of .mil PF starts with a D, which stands for doctrine, training and doctrine command, okay? So this is a schoolhouse, so kind of stamp my foot there. So if you put up the mission command, so this is the Army's mission command. It is our command philosophy. It is our leadership philosophy. And it's outlined in ADP 6.0, which is this book right here. Now, there's a couple of things that you all get to benefit from. So when I first came into TRADOC, and they informed me that TRADOC writes doctrine, and figure I may not be that intuitive, pick it up. They say, hey, sir, you know, you're the doctrine guy. First question I had was, well, how much doctrine is there? You know, how much is there? I mean, I'm trying to size my workload here because I got a 4-day weekend coming up. I mean, how much doctrine is there? And so the head of the doctrine says, sir, there's 535 field manuals ranging in length from 1 to 300 pages. I said, whoa, I probably haven't read all those. Don't worry, sir, we're going to redo the whole thing. We're going to redo the whole thing. So the benefit to you all is we no longer have 535 field manuals ranging from 1 to 300 pages. What we have is manuals of which the guidance put out was they will be no more than 10 pages. No more than 10 pages long, okay? And they will fit in this box. I call this boxo doctrine, okay? So you kind of have your 14 key manuals right here. They fit in this one box, 10 to 14 pages long. So that's one of the benefits of having a former armor officer as a TRADOC commander. You pick somebody that doesn't know many words, you're not going to have many words in your doctrine. So it's a forcing function. That's another thing leaders do, is you come up with forcing functions. And the other good thing about it is, again, as a former armor officer, as a TRADOC commander, the first page is kind of a picture, okay? And so, believe me, this is the first page of ADP 6.0. It's what I call a logic map. Okay, so what is this? In other words, this is really the cliff notes, if they still make them in this digitized age. This is the cliff notes of this whole manual. Okay, so you know, if you can't wade through all 10 pages, okay, then you can go to this, because the issue is if you are going to go to the nightly Fort Benning cocktail party, you know it's just a matter of time till Mission Command comes up, right? So you don't want to go to a Fort Benning cocktail party without knowing Mission Command. So if you're pressed for time, you say, look, I'm just going to open this baby, go to the Cliff Notes, read one page, and I'll get through the cocktail party. I'm good to go. So again, Sergeant Major and I are trying to make life easy for you. So this is a Cliff Notes version of this manual, and what it does is it kind of contextualizes the whole manual, and it puts it in perspective of the rest of the manuals here in the box. Now, the good news is, as we go through this, all of these manuals are related to all of the other manuals, okay? So hopefully you'll see, as Sergeant Major and I talk through this, there's a thread of continuity that one leads to the other. What we used to do before is we would have one manual out of 530, and we would update it every 5 years. We would update that manual, then we'd do another one, and we'd have a couple going on simultaneously. The problem is, by design, as you talk about that, some are always going to be out of sync. So what we did, again, I date myself, it's kind of like taking doctrine like an Etch-a-Sketch, turn it upside down and zero it out, and wrote it all from scratch. Now the problem is, you've got to write it all from scratch, you got a lot of work to do, but then it's all synchronized, it's all together. So again, we did a lot of R&D this. Like I said, 10 pages was the maximum. This one's got 12 because everything's possible in the Army with a waiver. You know, we kind of tested on groups, et cetera, like that. The other thing is we packaged it like this, so it's a boxo doctrine. So like I said, you can't buy just single versions of this. You got to buy the whole box set, so it's a little bit of a marketing ploy as well. Plus, as we experimented with this, we've tried to, leave no stone unturned and think our way through it to help you get through this. Again, for the folks in ABOLC out there, that if you can't wade through all 10 pages at once, you can kind of stretch it out over time. So if you are in your private library, otherwise known as the bathroom, we have found that this will fit right between the toilet and the wall if it's built to standard, if your house is built to code, and it's right there. So every time you go in there, you can work your way through it, and we've left nothing to chance, okay? So it fits right within your private reading room space allocated to this. So no reason you can't work through it. So let me walk you through this, because this is our command philosophy for the Army. This is doctrinally how the Army is going to run. It's how it's supposed to run. At all echelons of command, platoon, 4-star headquarters, corps, division, etc. like that. And basically what it says is what we want our Army to be able to do, what the Army is for, is to seize, retain, exploit the initiative. Not retain the bridge crossing, not seize the high ground, seize, retain, exploit the initiative. Okay? Could be the initiative against the Taliban, could be the initiative against Hurricane Sandy. Whatever your mission is, we want you to get the initiative to always be at a position of relative advantage. Always be at a position of relative advantage. Why do we say relative advantage? Because we're saying the future is unknown and constantly changing. So what's a position of advantage today may not be a position of advantage tomorrow. So you've always got to exploit the initiative. Because one of the examples I give, if you're on the high ground here and a low ground here, and the bad guy's down here on the low ground, and you say, well, I'm just going to retain this position of advantage, I'm just going to dig in more overhead cover, but you're not maintaining SA. What if overnight the bad guys down here sign a coalition treaty with the folks up here? Where are you now? You're at a position of disadvantage. Was it because of anything you did? No, the world changed around you and you didn't keep up with it. That's why we're saying you have to exploit the initiative, not just retain it. You must exploit it. You always must be one step ahead of whatever your challenge is or whatever your enemy is or whatever your foe is. Always be one step ahead of it because you are going into a very fast changing world that's very unpredictable. So how do we do that? How do you conduct unified land operations? You execute mission command. Now, I get a couple of pushbacks, feedbacks on mission command when we put out. I must say, truth in lending, I'm a little parochial to it. It was the first manual we put out when I came into TRADOC, so there's a little pride of ownership here. But if you're sort of the older generation, like my peers and retired 4-stars, something like that, the first thing they'll say is, Dave, why'd you do away with command and control as a warfighting function? Or just why'd you do away with command and control? And I say, well, first of all, we didn't do away with it, sir. In fact, it's in our doctrine. In fact, it's in the mission command manual. It's in there in bold and highlighted. So it's bold and highlighted. So command and control is a doctrinal term. It's just not a warfighting function. So command and control is a doctrinal term. It's just not a warfighting function. The warfighting function is mission command, and it balances command and control. But you still will give commands, and you will have means of control. Because under the old construct, in the known world, command and control was defined as command, issue an order, control, ensure compliance. Command, issue an order, control, ensure compliance. What we're saying now is I'm not focusing on controlling compliance. I'm balancing command and control to empower the initiative. So what mission command is balancing command and control to empower the initiative. Because we're saying for this world up to 2030, it is so unpredictable. Things are going to change so quickly. I can't control every move you make. What I have to do is figure out how I balance command and control to empower everybody to exploit the initiative continually. Because you don't control initiative, you empower initiative. Well, how do I do that? Right down here. Commander or leader. First of all, you drive the operations process. As I tell folks, it's compared to attend it. I've worked for a number of commanders who really attended the process. I'm not sure they drove it. Drive the operations process through the activities of understand, visualize, describe, direct, lead, and assess. Understand, visualize, describe, direct, lead, and assess. What we're saying is I want you to understand your environment, understand who's in your coalition, understand all of the variables there, understand what elements of national power you have, understand your constraints, understand caveats, understand all of that. Then understanding all of the constraints, understanding the environment, understanding the volatility of it, in understanding what assets you have available to you, I then want you to visualize how you're going to use all the assets that I've given you, and based upon a visualization of how you're going to array them in time and space, I then want you to describe your visualization of how you're going to solve this problem that results in a common understanding to your subordinates, peers, superiors, and anybody else. That's what mission command is. Develop as good an understanding as you can, visualize how you're going to solve the problem, and then describe your visualization to everybody else involved. You notice it's not understand, visualize, tell. Okay? Command and control was tell. Command, tell you to do something, control, ensure compliance. It's describe. In other words, you must describe your visualization in a way that resonates with the people you're describing it to. So if you're from the brigade of the 101st Airborne and you're in Western Africa dealing with Ebola, and you're talking a 3rd platoon, probably the way you describe your visualization of what you want to do is different than if the World Health Organization or Doctors Without Borders walks into your talk. The way you're going to describe what you're doing to them is not the same way you describe it to the 3rd platoon, because their contextualization and experience is completely different. That's why it's describe, not tell. Then directly assess. So I get a couple of pushbacks. One is, hey Dave, why'd you get rid of command and control? And you just renamed it. It's the same thing. What'd you need, like an OER support form bullet? I said, I could take the bullet, but, it's actually, first of all, we didn't do away with command and control. And second of all, it's not the same thing at all. Okay? So that's what I get from my peers, retired 4-stars, everything like that. Perkins just try to be funny, rename something, want to get credit for it. It's the same thing. I have to respectfully remind them, didn't do away with it. It's not the same thing. And then sort of sometimes from younger audiences, maybe more like the group out here, what I get is, hey, mission command, I think that pretty much means nobody can tell me what to do. And I'm like, what? I don't see that in there anywhere. Maybe I missed over it. Maybe it's on page 9. I need to read through the whole book. But I'm pretty familiar with the book. And I don't remember any part of it that said, and by the way, you can't tell anybody in the Army what to do. Thou shalt be no mandatory training, on and on and on, okay? It doesn't say that at all, okay? As a matter of fact, it's understand, visualize, describe, direct. Direct, not mildly recommend. Direct, okay? I can't be any more direct than that. In other words, we're going to direct you to do a lot, okay? So I said, Lieutenant, I'm going to direct you to do a lot. Lieutenant General, I'm going to direct you to do a lot. It's just that I'm not going to direct you until we've generated a common understanding of the problem and we have a common visualization. And then I'm going to give you directions in such a way that they're based on commander's intent and they're empowering your initiative. But you will get direction. But it will be a lot of understanding and visualization going on before that. So the deal with this is mission command is a very leader-centric way to run an army. It's a very commander-leader-centric. It puts a lot of rocks in the leader's rucksack. So this is one of the other misunderstandings about this. Somehow it's hands-off, that mission command is laissez-faire. It's hands-off, you're not involved. Kind of like, talk to a company commander, hey sir, I was out at training last week and it's really screwed up. The battalion commander came out, was checking on me, asking questions, all that. What's up with that? Mission command is I just kind of LD and self-actualize, do whatever I want. Nobody's supposed to check on me. I was out there, battalion commanders asking all kinds of questions, things like that. I felt like saying, hey, sir, come on, this is mission command. What are you doing out here? It felt like going to IG, file a command and control complaint. I said, that's not mission command. In fact, if you're executing mission command, your leaders are very involved in what's going on. You spend a lot of time understanding, visualizing, describing. If somebody says, I never see my commander, I'm like, well, then he's not executing mission command. It doesn't mean the absence of command or anything like that. In fact, we really kind of focus on the word command, leader. It's commander and leader-centric. You have to be very involved. You know what? If you have an ill-trained, ill-led, ill-disciplined organization, what do? You control it, okay? If you have a well-trained, well-led, you spend a lot of time invested in it, then you're going to empower it. If you don't know, if somebody knows how to do something, are you going to empower them? No, if you don't know somebody knows how to do something, you're going to control them. So before you empower 1st Platoon, you're probably going to make sure you know how that 1st Platoon knows what you're doing. If you're a battalion commander and you say Alpha Company conduct a movement to contact, you probably ought to make sure Alpha Company knows how the hell to do a movement to contact. So you're going to be very engaged. There's probably going to be a hell of a lot of mandatory training. There's going to be sticks lanes. There's going to be CTC rotations. There's going to be all kinds of stuff going on. The absence of that has nothing to do with Mission Command. Mission Command is about creating a common understanding and then describing a visualization and then directing people in a way that empowers them to exploit the initiative. But it has nothing to do with not being involved and not telling people what to do or anything like that at all. In fact, it's actually just the opposite. So, hence, Sergeant Major and I are down here with all the generals and command sergeant majors in TRADOC. You say, well, Perkins, he's a micromanager. He's going to have a room full of generals here for 2 whole days. Front leading rest position, we're going to, No, do you know what we're doing down here? We're trying to come to a common understanding of the way 2020 is going to look. 2030, what's it going to look like? So General Lundy, from an aviation point of view, Rucker, describe to me your visualization. General Miller, from a maneuver point of view, I need your visualization. What's your concept for maneuver? Okay? Going right down the line. General Barrier, from the intel warfighting function, give me a visualization of what the intel can do for me so it can assist the maneuver formation on and on and on based on 2030. So we are all down here we'll be here for 3 days. Me and, all my closest general officer friends and command sergeant majors trying to get a common understanding of what the future holds for us and a visualization, all that. So then I can go back to the Chief of Staff of the Army, the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, the Secretary of the Army, and say, hey, Chief, Mr. Secretary, I think we need to direct this. This is what we need to buy. We need to buy one of these things. Or we need to chain our doctrine this way, or we need to reorganize divisions this way, or we need to get rid of brigades, or whatever it is. And that's based on my understanding of what the world looks like now that I sort of have this common vision. That's what Mission Command is about. If command and control, I could bring down all the people from TRADOC and say, we're going to be here for like 10 minutes. Because that's all I need, because I'm just going to tell you what to do. Okay, Fort Rucker, you do this. Fort Benning, you do this. Fort Choke, you do this. Are there any questions? No, leave, go. I can tell them. But to create a common understanding of the future, I need 3 days with these guys. Plus, they're not that sharp, so no, they're actually unbelievable. But that's what Mission Command is. So when you go out to be a leader, if you say, you know what, I like this Mission Command, what I'd say is strap in. Because if you're in charge of an organization that's being commanded as doctrinally you're supposed to be by Mission Command, you are going to spend a hell of a lot of time of your personal energy, your personal emotion, et cetera, like that, investing in your organization, creating that understanding and visualization before you even get to the direct lead and assess. I spend most of my time in the Army trying to understand the problem, visualize the solution, and describing it to folks. I don't spend that much of my time directing. I don't go around like, this is an order, do this. This is an order, do this. I don't have to do that. First of all, that's easy. Giving orders is easy. Trying to understand the problem. All the time I say, well, what's the problem? Sir, we need to do this. We need to buy this. I'm like, what for? Why would we want to buy a tank that big? Why would we want that? What for? Well, sir, I don't know. I don't understand. I spend most of my time understanding and visualizing and then trying to describe it to other people up on Capitol Hill, to members of Congress. This is why we need $5 Brazilian to buy one of these things. Do you understand? Do you understand the future? Do you have a visualization of the future? I just don't spend much of my time directing, quite honestly. I spend a lot of my time leading, okay, and then assessing, but the directing part is sort of more implied. At your level, it's a little bit more direct leadership. But I would tell you, you get a lot more bang for your buck if you spend more of your time understanding and visualization than running around barking out orders. So I told you, this is a leader-centric, command-centric philosophy. This is your Army's doctrine. It's not something I made up. Okay, the manual is signed by 2 people, well, 3 people, myself, 2 other people, Chief of Staff of the Army, Secretary of the Army. So I said, unless you're in an organization that does not eventually report to the Chief of Staff or the Secretary of the Army, and this has nothing to do with you. But if on the offhand chance your organization does report to them, this has a hell of a lot to do with you. So, since I told you this is a commander-centric, leader-centric philosophy, again, Command Sergeant Major Davenport and I are here to help you out, make your job easier. We have a book for you, okay? And we're pretty simple kind of guys. So we said, you know what? If we want to have a philosophy on how to accomplish the mission, if we want to have a philosophy on how we want you to command in order to accomplish the mission, how about if we call it Mission Command, okay? And we've already said that Mission Command is leader-centric. It's all about leadership. So let's write a book called Leadership, Army Leadership, okay? So this is not hard to follow, folks, not hard to follow. So again, it's in the box O doctrine, so it's right down there in your private reading room. So you pick it up, okay, ADP 622, if you can go to that slide. Again, it's got the logic map. And this is our doctrinal foundation for leadership. Not that difficult, quite honestly. And what we say is what we want our leaders to do is to have really two large sort of components of leadership: attributes and competencies. And there's a lot of research behind this, and we have a lot of experience in research. And attributes are what we want you to be and know. Attributes are what we want you to be and know, okay? So I want you, okay, to know the Army values. I want you to be fit. I want you to be resilient. I want you to know your expertise. I want you to know how to innovate. But what we're saying, just being and knowing stuff, having personal attributes in and of itself is not enough. You must array them in time and space and actually do something with them, okay? And English majors out there, correct me if I'm wrong, but these all start with the verb. In other words, I need you to lead others, build trust, communicate, develop others, be a steward of the profession, get results. You must get results. We are not an altruistic jobs program, contrary to popular belief. We are a results-oriented organization, but you must get results while improving the command climate of your organization. You must get results while making people better. You must get results while making your unit better. You can't get results by destroying people. You can't get results by destroying your unit. You have to have a sense of esprit de corps, and people need to feel that you are developing others. And see, you must do all of these things. You must have these personal attributes, and then you must do something with them. You must array them in time and space. You know, very interesting, every year the Center for Army Leadership out at Fort Leavenworth does the survey. It's called the CASL survey. Some of you may have taken it. It's where we do an assessment of ourselves in the Army, how we're doing on leadership. And what we do is we ask from E4 to Colonel, E4 to Colonel. I say we really don't care what generals think anymore, but we ask from E4 to Colonel. It would say, we want you to grade the Army on leadership. How are we doing on leadership? And there's a bunch of questions you ask, etc. like that. And you may remember a couple of years ago, a big headline in Army Times says, you know, there's too many toxic leaders in the Army, etc. like that. That wasn't some investigative reporter from Army Times. That was, we found that from our CASL. We put it on the website. They just went to the website and downloaded it and basically repeated what we said in our AAR. So we do it every year. Last year, we had 30,000 respondents from E4 to Colonel, kind of grading the Army on leadership. Now, you know, this is a political season, presidential election year, so there's always kind of political polls out there and everything, and you always see polls, people up or down or something. And they usually will have somewhere, if it's a Gallup poll or something, the survey size. Now, if there's any ORSA folks out here or something like that, but generally speaking, if you look at these polls, they're between like 400 and 800 sampling size, and that's generally seen as a scientifically reliable number. Last year, we had over 30,000 respondents. 30,000 respondents to answer basically our self-assessment of as an Army is how we're doing on leadership. That's a huge sampling there. And you get a lot of great trends. I'm a big sort of trend analysis guy. But one of the things really jumped out at me that I really pay attention to, and that's kind of one of the last questions. So, you know, there's a bunch of questions there, sort of like that. And the last question really got my attention, and it really made me think about a number of things. And the reason is because to contextualize the question, it basically says, in your own words, describe the best leader you've ever worked for. So if you're a corporal, the best platoon sergeant you've ever had. If you're a lieutenant, the best company commander you ever had. If you're a platoon sergeant, the best lieutenant you had. Whatever, they can pick whatever they want. Just describe to me in your own words the best leader you ever had. Now, the reason that the responses are so good is because most of the people in the Army, unlike you at Fort Benning, don't read doctrine every day. I know you guys read it every day. I know you have all this memorized, etc. But I know everybody's not like you, okay? And I don't take it personally. So our major does sometimes, but I've got past that. So I know everybody doesn't read doctrine every day. In fact, I know that most people in the Army don't even know we have a manual on leadership. They don't even know we have ADP 622. They definitely don't know that we have attributes and competencies and categories and stuff like that. They are clueless. So they don't even know that there's a right answer. They don't even know that when we ask them a question, when they give us an answer, we're going to bin it. They don't even know there's bins. They think actually we want to know what they think. So when we ask them the question and describe to me The best leader you've ever worked for, what's amazing is they don't even know there's bins. They don't even know we're really looking at it and categorize it. The fact of the matter is the majority of the answers, without them even knowing that we have categories, come back in one category. What do you think that is? Competencies. What my leader does. That's how I'm grading my leader. What they're saying is, I really don't care how smart my leader is. I just want to know, is he helping others? I don't care if my leader gets the highest PT score. I just want to know, are they leading from the front? Now, what we know from experience is you must have threshold capability up here. Because if you are not fit, you can't lead from the front. If you don't know what you're doing, then how are you going to develop others? So we know that. We know you have to have threshold capabilities. But what your subordinates are saying, what they're grading you on, is not your personal attributes. They're saying, what do you do with them? Okay, you're the honor grad, great. I don't care. What does that mean to me? What does that mean to my unit, to my platoon, to my company, to my squad? In other words, are you building trust? Are you helping the esprit de corps? They're saying, I care what you do, not how good you personally are. That's actually very insightful, okay? Because we started seeing this a couple years ago. Think about when you were in basic training, or when you were in pre-commissioning course, or in ABOLC, or whatever. What do we usually grade you on? We usually grade you on what? Your attributes, right? What's your GP score? What's your GPA? What's your PT score? How good you do LINAV, on and on. It's all about you. That's what we graded you on, right? It was all about your personal attributes. That's how we sort of brought you up in the Army. And then we're sitting back here like, we focus a lot on our personal attributes. I just don't know why we have so many negative, self-absorbed leaders that are so self-focused. How could that possibly be? Well, maybe we're kind of, as you sow, so shall you reap. Maybe we're building them. Maybe we focused excessively on this when our subordinates were kind of focusing on this. So you know what we did? We changed the OER, we changed the NCOA, we changed our doctrine, we've changed BOLC, basic training, stuff like that, and we're starting to focus more on this. Look at the OER and NCOA, and you're going to see competencies out there. Because the way our OER was, our superior, when we were in all the courses you're in, pre-commissioning courses, and quite honestly, our superiors were grading us on this, but our subordinates were grading us on this. Okay, so now what we do is we balance it. We know you must have threshold level capability this, but understand when you go back out to the force, do you know what your subordinates are grading you on? This. What are you doing for me, Lieutenant, Captain, Sergeant? What are you doing for the organization? Do I feel good about being in your organization? Are we getting results? Nobody wants to be in a loser organization. Everybody wants to get results, but they want to feel good about how they do it. I'm not saying make it easy. I'm just saying make it positive. Okay, those are two very different things. Don't make it easy, just make it positive. Make it a positive experience, not an easy experience, because people want to do well and get results. So I'll give you a little insight here. I was telling the folks this morning about this. It's very interesting because, our subordinates have already kind of picked this up a long time ago. There is one exception, though. There was one attribute that came out just as often as the competencies. What do you think that attribute is? It's multiple choice. Yeah, I wouldn't have got it right either. Judgment. Judgment. And you know what? I think those specialists and sergeants and lieutenants are saying, they say, you know what? It seems to me like the world's very unpredictable and things are changing all the time. And there are just certain leaders that you put them in a position they've never been in before, and they always just seem to make the right decision. It's not a cookie cutter. You never could have predicted it was coming. All kinds of stuff was going on. It was dark. We were under contact. It was raining. We lost a weapon, on and on and on. Everything was going wrong. And this leader just seemed to make the right decision all the time. They seem to have really good judgment. Isn't that amazing? They're like E4s and sergeants and lieutenants figure that out. They said that's a very important aspect, a very important attribute for my leader. They have to have a good judgment. Now, we know if you're not a person of value, you're not going to make good judgment. Okay, so we know that. But they're just focusing on the output. In other words, good judgment. I mean, it's amazing how insightful these folks who never read doctrine are, right? It actually kind of reaffirms what we have up there. So I'll give you sort of one example of that reinforces it. So, as I said, Sergeant Major and I were at Leavenworth, and we go to the pre-command course, and that's where you have every month, That's how big our Army is. We have battalion commanders and brigade commanders to be in there, command sergeant majors. And the first time I did that, I was telling the folks here today, actually it was a very sort of depressing situation. I was a 3-star at the time, first time I did it. And I walk in, it's a room about this big, and this happened to be all the battalion commanders. And the way the timing was, I walked in, and my first time, couple of times doing it as a 3-star, I look out, and there's people in the audience that were lieutenants in my battalion when I was a battalion commander. And I'm looking out like, hey, Lieutenant Jones, what's up? He goes, sir, it's Lieutenant Colonel Jones. Like, how'd that happen? Like, wow, I am really old. So it was very depressing to realize that Lieutenant Jones is now Lieutenant Colonel Jones. That just cannot be, I can't be that old. So, okay, take the wind out of my sails, take a deep breath, I'm back at it, okay, let's go. So I said, okay, afterwards, let's talk over the side here, we're gonna tell war stories, because that's why we stay in the Army, to tell war stories, and they get better each rotation, et cetera, like that. And so afterwards, Lieutenant Jones, now Lieutenant Colonel Jones, goes, hey, how you doing? Yeah, I remember when we were in the battalion, everything like that. And he goes, sir, do you remember when? And I figured he's going to talk about, hey, do you remember when, like, the good old glory days when we were like top battalion in USR, when we kicked the Op-4's ass and won every rotation, the CTC. I mean, that's how I remember it at least. When we did this, when we did that. So, the glory days, they're going to talk about that because that's how I remember my battalion command anyways. But so here was the second part where they took the wind out of my sails. First of all, they're like, sir, you're really old. The second thing, they're like, hey, sir, do you know what I remember most? I remember most when, and then they would say something, but you could fill in the blank, and it would be sort of characterized like this. What I remember most is when, boom, and this boom could be characterized as, what I remember most is when things were really screwed up and we all thought you were about to be relieved. I said, really? That's all you remember? I said, I sort of tried to put that past my memory, resiliency, cope with it. I had to join a support group to get past that. So they're like, yeah, sir, yeah, we thought for sure you were going down that time. And apparently there were quite a few because each one has a different story. But the genre is the same. Sir, what we remember most is when this really bad thing happened. And, we thought for sure this is it. Perkins has escaped a number of these, but this time he's going down because have you heard what happened? And then the third thing he would say that really got my attention, he said, and sir, what I remember most is when that really bad thing happened, he said, what I remember is you did this. You said this. What he was saying is what we were paying attention to is what you did. The other thing is what he was saying is pay attention to is, whenever I take over an organization, I give everyone the theater, I give command philosophy and all like that. And what they're kind of relating is that, when everything's going good, we're in a climate-controlled room, we have a full stomach, we're well-rested, something like that, you can yap on all day you want. Command philosophy, yada, 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 how we're going to work at gunnery, maintenance, something like that. And we may be paying attention, we may not. But when the stuff hits the fan, and we think you're going down, sir, you have our attention. All eyes are on you. Because, of course, what I think is, you were a lieutenant. You paid attention to that. I didn't even think you were paying attention. Lieutenants are paying attention. He was saying, in fact, sir, that's about the only time we pay attention to you, is when really bad things happen. Because you know what they're saying is, that is the true measure of a leader. That's the measure of the leader, is when things are going really bad. And you know what? They don't care what you say. They don't care what command climate, command philosophy is tacked on the bulletin board or something. All they care is what you do. They're just reinforcing the whole castle thing. So as I tell folks, so when you have those worst days of command, of leadership, as a platoon sergeant or a company commander or platoon leader or something like that, don't view it as a bad day, view it as a leader development opportunity. Because I can guarantee one thing, you've got everybody's attention. When things are going really bad, everyone's paying attention to you, and they want to know what the hell you're going to do about it. Okay? And I got this over and over and over again from these lieutenants that were in my battalion, like, sir, remember when this happened, and then that was horrible, and Alpha Company this, and then they say, and sir, what I remember most is you did this, you said this. And they remember it as it was yesterday. They remember it like it was yesterday. I was a battalion commander in 1996, okay? So they remember it like it was yesterday. It's 20 years ago. So what they're saying is like, we never forget. What they're saying is we never forget what you do, because that's what we pay attention to, what you do, Colonel. general. I say that to you so that you don't have to wait till you're a 3-star general to realize people are paying attention to what you do. Which then means you've got to decide what personal attributes you are going to develop yourself so that you can always do the right thing. Because that's what people remember. And it's not just like they remember it for a while. They're going to remember it for 20 years. For 20 years, as if it was yesterday. And they remember such excruciating detail. Sir, you did this. You said that. This happened outside. I'm like, holy cow. And it's not like he had a notebook either. It's like up here. It's actually very powerful, but it's kind of scary too. Because guess what? When things aren't going well, are we always kind of on our best game? Of course, then I'm thinking like, holy cow. What did I say? What did he remember? You know, I'm like, hey, tell me more, tell me more. You know, kind of correct the record here. I was, about a month ago, one of the, when I was a brigade commander, there was a captain in my brigade. He was a company commander, and now he's becoming a battalion commander. So he sent me a note, invited me to change of command, and you know I couldn't go, etc. like that. So I sent him a note and called him on the phone and was talking to him. And he sent me an email. He goes, sir, when I was in your brigade, he said, I had a little book, and I have all these stupid little sayings that you've seen here today and everything like that. He says, I was writing down everything you did. I wrote down everything you did, what you said, you know, how you handled problems, everything like that. So he was a captain, I was brigade commander, so he said, I'm writing all that down. He says, now, next Friday, I'm going to take battalion command. He says, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this book, and that's how I'm going to command my battalion. I'm going to command my battalion by the way I wrote down everything you did. I'm like, holy cow. I'm like, send me the book. Well, what did I do? Like that. I said, don't give it to the IG. And now I'm thinking like, holy, really? You're taking notes? And that's going to be how you're going to command your unit? I said, wow, you know, what a responsibility, right? I mean, but you got to understand, when you are the leader, that's the level that you're in. Everything is focusing on what you do, and they're paying attention. And if they decide it's the right, if they think you have good judgment, that's what they're going to do when they're in your shoes. Okay? That's what they're going to do based on your judgment when they're in your shoes. What I'd like to do now is I'm turn over to the Sergeant Major to give you some update on a couple things like that, and then he and I will sort of take Q&A about anything you want to talk about. You get a mic, Sergeant Major? I'll give you mine.
There we go.
I just want to pass the mic off to you because we're almost to the question and answer part.
What? Well, sir, I think if we could leave up that slide. I'm mic'd.
You're mic'd up?
Yeah,
okay, all right.
I need just pointer.
All right.
So, well, good afternoon. I'm Sergeant Major Dave Davenport, the TRADOC Sergeant Major. I appreciate being the closer right before everyone gets out of here to go home. So I just want to take a few moments. Hopefully you've got as much out of that as I did sitting there because my mind started racing. And I would tell you this is the first time in the 10 months that I've been the CG Sergeant Major that we've been able to talk leader development specifically to this audience like this. And I really think what I do for our Army, really, I need you all's help. So a lot of ideas were racing through my mind. And if I was to offer any advice for my 30 years of being a non-commissioned officer, it really boiled down to 4 or 5 things as I was sitting there and I was listening to CG in this slide. First and foremost, I think that each and every one at this level, whether it's IBOLC, ABOLC, Captain's Career Course, or the great non-commissioned officers over here, I need you to be masters of your weapon systems. I need you to know everything about that, whatever weapon system that you're responsible for, whether it's an MGS, a Bradley, or an M4, because those soldiers are going to be looking to you to want to ask questions. And so that means in that self-development domain, which I think many of us are deficient in developing ourselves, that means you may have to prepare yourself to get that expertise so that those soldiers recognize that you're a competent leader when you say, I need you to do this with that weapon system. So first and foremost, I would say develop expertise, master your weapon system. The second thing that came to my mind as I was sitting there listening to the CG is really about we usually talk about it in the ALC, fight, outnumbered, and win. Okay, it's about fighting. And I couldn't just sitting there and thinking about being here at the Great Maneuver Center of Excellence and the great Ranger program that I got to walk some lanes with, really fighting. Know and understand squad tactics. If you can maneuver an infantry squad, you can maneuver a tech section or a Bradley section. It's kind of very similar. It's just a different type of formation, right? So know and understand squad tactics. This is where I can need some help in both those. We have a lot of great programs here at Fort Benning, Georgia that's not being used. First of all, a great Master Gunner program. I don't know if y'all know, but we're not at capacity in getting at those non-commissioned officers that truly have expertise and into the schoolhouse so we can build upon that. Because what happens is usually that non-commissioned officer is the most important thing. Oh, I can't send Davenport to the next class because I need him for gunnery. Or we got a big maneuver, we got a CTC rotation coming up. I got to hold on to Davenport. So we don't send Davenport to a great institutional course, the Master Gunner program, to build upon that expertise, to build upon the competencies of that non-commissioned officer so they can come back and help the organization. Ranger School is no different. The Scout Leaders course. Those courses that build expertise or build upon competencies, they're not being filled to capacity. And that's where you all can help me to get soldiers into those types of courses. The third thing that dawned on me while I was sitting there reflecting what the CG was saying is master your weapon system, know and understand squad tactics, know how to fight. Third thing is really the diverse group. Know the role of the non-commissioned officer. That's for this 2/3 of the room. And then you all got to know your role as a non-commissioned officer. Okay? How does your responsibilities tie into these attributes and competencies? Non-commissioned officers, what we do for the officer corps is we bring our experience, our expertise to the force. And if you want to be credible, you got to have that expertise. So understand your role as non-commissioned officers and understand the role, how non-commissioned officers can help you. The fourth thing that dawned on me when the CG was up here talking about is this concept of the positive environment. I'm here to tell you there's going to be days that just absolutely suck. Okay? And how you handle the suck is going to go throughout your organization that you lead, whether it's a platoon, a company, or a platoon or a company on this side of the room. How you handle that climate. Are they prepared to handle the suck? How are you handling? Are you griping, complaining, oh, it's them above us? But setting that climate. And really the fifth thing that dawned on me, 4 or 5, is our soldiers. Now, 10 months into this job, I guess 11 months now, I really get a lot of excitement going to the basic training and the AITs and the OSETs for here at Fort Benning. You know, we write off this generation of soldiers as being lazy, fat, they're less than we are. I find that I have a different opinion. I think that they're seeking something, they want to be a part of something, and it's up to us to get them to that standard so that they can join the team. They're very inquisitive, they ask a lot of questions, and they want to be helped along the way. They just don't want to be written off. So I think if you kind of do those 5 things, master your weapon system, understand squad tactics, know and understand the role of the NCO, have fun, and truly value or truly have soldiers in your heart is a better way of saying it. The soldiers will see that, and because that competency that you demonstrate, they'll follow you anywhere. They'll do anything that you ask. That is kind of what I got out of the CG's remarks. We need help. We're not maxing schools or filling up schools to build that expertise. And the number one reason is our soldiers are fearful of, if it has anything to do with the APFT, they're fearful of it. That's another place that you all can help us. We yield the fact that the APFT is crappy. But there's 55,000 soldiers out there that can't take the crappy PT test. Our backlog of non-commissioned officers getting in the seats where you're sitting is about 14,000. 14,000 non-commissioned officers need PME. 4,000 have been in grade 3 or more years leading those great soldiers I just told you about. Of that population, 1,200 have been deferred 6 or more times from getting in the classroom. Reasons? Adverse actions, can't pass the APFT, and height weight. So that's where this crowd can help me get those NCOs into those PMEs to get them certified in those core competencies so that they can get out there and help you lead your organizations. Now, usually what I talk about is NCO 2020, the direction that we're going to reshape non-commissioned officers' professional military education in order to lead the formations of the year 2025. Let me just say, it's just not STEP. You may have heard about it. Select, train, educate, promote. That STEP is just a small piece in what we're trying to do with PME. STEP is a forcing function to get NCOs into the schoolhouse, okay? That in order to be promoted, you have to have the E, the education, in order to pin on. So that's how we're going to trip down the backlog over the next 18 months to get everybody back into the brick and mortar or their education so that we certify them in the core competencies. But there's a lot more. So if we got them coming to the academic environment, then let's maximize that. Let's look at the POIs. Let's look at our instructor certifications. Is the training challenging? Does it have rigor? Are we holding soldiers accountable? And then when we're talking about accountability, on the back end is the 1059 that y'all been reading a lot about. Is the changing of the standards on the AER, the Academic Evaluation Report. Putting rigor behind that so that paper means something. So you must come to school and do the very best. Let me just tell you, because I had a great conversation with an NCO over here that's a drill sergeant. At drill sergeant school, we actually were having drill sergeants show up on day one, purposely failing the PT test because they knew they weren't going to get a 1059 out of it, and they didn't want to do that task. They didn't want the honor and privilege of leading those young men and women that I just told you about that coming into our Army. So we made the PT test a graduation requirement. You take it week 7 of the 8-week course, and now it's going on your 1059. So we're trying to add some meat behind the 1059, more than just PT. Height, weight, which usually comes up, grade point averages, class enumeration, a writing assessment. All our PME courses now have a writing assessment that they have to take that follows you along your career as a non-commissioned officer to make sure that you're working in that self-development domain to improve. Because much what we're trying to do is make less bullets, more writing about our great soldiers. And then lastly, doing a 360 self-assessment. It's already a requirement, but we're not just tracking it. And it helps that non-commissioned officer, that leader, to understand if they have any blind spots so they get a chance to work on it before they go out and take over positions that increase responsibility. Now, I know there's a lot of folklore out there right now. We're going to do a town hall on the March 3rd because I've been on everything from WTF on Facebook to various Army Times articles. I assure you that we've tried to think this out progressive and sequential, but we're always open to great ideas. So on March the 3rd, we're going to do a live town hall throughout the Army from 1700 to 1900 Eastern Standard Time. Log on to the TRADOC News, TRADOC website, and you'll see how you can log on, ask questions, or just follow along. Then lastly, comments from you all. You know, we are in the design and build firm, we're general architects, but we also like hearing back from the customers. And I don't know if you notice on the slides, but there's several ways that you can get that feedback to us about how what we're building is holding up. Can we do any improvements? Various media's, TRADOC Twitter page, our Facebook page, and then I think the world famous, if I may say so, sir, Sergeant Major blog.
Of course.
Of course.
It's gone viral.
It's gone viral. So that's about all I have, sir. I think we should now turn it over to them.
Yeah, you guys could open up to questions. It could be about anything. It doesn't have to be what Sergeant Major and I talked about. It could be about anything, you know, rumors you've heard. If you want to start a rumor, confirm or deny. Sergeant Major and I spent a lot of time with senior Army leaders Like I said, I'm about to go over, and we're going to have every leader in training and doctrine command there, all the generals, command sergeant majors, all the commandants from every school, COE, et cetera. Next week, I'll be at the Army 4-star conference with all the 4-stars planning your future. So now's your time to give me your input so I can take it with me. And because this is about, describe, visualize, understand. Yeah, go ahead. Yes, sir.
Hey, sir, I'm Captain Pancho Gonzalez from MCoE. Just wanted to know how your mission to design and build an army for the future is affected by today's budget environment, and how you as a leader mitigate that risk.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I get that a lot. The future's got to be expensive. How do you go about this? So that's why we've said first order principle. I'm a big first order principle person. So as we look to the future, we say, you know what? The world is going to change very rapidly. The transmission of data, technology, et cetera, things are going to change much quicker than the Army I came in. So one of the first order principles is we have to adapt and innovate very quickly. So when we come up with a command philosophy, it better be one that allows us to innovate quickly, always get the initiative, always stay ahead of somebody. We're looking at redesigning our acquisition system to increase a high rate of innovation, so it doesn't take 15 years to get a tank, et cetera, like that, because it'll be irrelevant. So we're trying to come up with these first order principles that are going to stand the test of time, that really have nothing to do with the budget. The budget will tell us how many tanks we can buy, but what we want to do is design a process that gets them out quickly, gets technology into your hands very quickly, allows us to develop critical thinkers when you go through Captain's Career Course, when you go to Command General Staff College, when you go to the War College. Are we developing you that you are thinking quickly, you're being a critical thinker, you can take what we give you and use it differently so you can outsmart the enemy? So we're trying to get the first order principles that really have nothing to do with the budget. What a budget does, it gives you capacity. What I'm focusing on is developing capability. What capability do we need? We have to innovate quickly. We have to be able to deal with anti-access, anti-denial. We have to do a lot of things. What the budget tells me is how often I can do it, over how large an area. Can I do it at 3 continents at a time? Can I do it only at 1 city at a time? So they are related yet divorced. So my capabilities, I am not restricting myself via a budget on a capability I need. It's going to be a matter of how much of that capability I can buy, how much capacity, and so they're parallel, yet one does not exclude the other. The question right here.
Sir, Captain Gargan, MCoE. Similar question. What kind of factors do go into designing the Army 30 or 15 years from now, especially considering next year, even with a new president, the nation and the world could be a completely different place?
Well, see, that's what I'm banking on. It is completely different. So I'm putting all my money in that things are going to change rapidly, and it's going to change dramatically. And so back to the budget thing. And so I talked to some of our general officer development courses. I call it the baby general course for our brigadier generals, and tell them to be generals and 2 stars. And one of the things I tell them is, let's think about it. What I hear a lot, my good friends on the Army staff out there, they deal with the budget and everything. They're like, what we just need is a predictable budget cycle. Predictable budgets, predictable that, and then the system will work and we'll be good to go. I said, hey, have you paid attention to politics lately in the international arena? What do you think the chances are that we're going to have a predictable budget? Every year it's brinksmanship, Budget Control Act, sequestration, and stuff like that. In other words, you need to come up with a system that is built on an unpredictable budget cycle. Okay, you can't build one that's built on a predictable budget cycle because you'll just be frustrated the whole time. So one of the examples I give folks is you have to decide, and that's what I'm getting together with all my smart friends here at TRADOC the next couple of days. You have to think what the future is going to be, and then how are you going to come to grips with it. And I tell folks I really only need to know one of 2 things: is the future known or is it unknown? Because if it's known, I build a kind of army, I buy certain equipment, and I buy it certain ways. If it's unknown, I develop people completely different, I buy different equipment, and I buy it differently. So I grew up during the Cold War, okay? So I grew up a lot of my time in the Cold War. And so they're like, hey, Perkins, this is a known problem. It's the Soviet Union. That's the enemy. No, I don't need any more guessing about who it is. And you're going to fight them in the Central Plains of Europe. You're not going to fight them in Western Africa or anybody. It's going to fight them in the Central Plains of Europe, and you're going to fight them with NATO. That's a coalition. Known enemy, known location, known coalition. And so when you design an army built on the known, what you do is, so you take this Lieutenant Perkins, and you say, what we're going to do is you're going to go to the GDP, General Defense Plan, the inter-German border. Here's your 1,500 meters, because we know this is where you're going, no doubt, 1,500 meters. I date myself, you're going to take your 5 M60 non-rise, non-passive tanks, you're going to dig them in, and this is where you're going to fight. And then every 90 days, you're going to go recon it and know more and more about it. Then you have a battle book in your safe, and you pull it out. You got to overlay with grease pencil. And so that's how we train and develop Perkins to deal with a known problem. We rehearse it over and over and over. We recon it over and over. We practice it, a redeployment of forces to Germany every year. We forge it. We work our time tables and our road march tables, because the expectation is when World War III starts, Perkins, you open your battle book, you execute your road march tables, you execute the script. And so that's the way we train people in a known world. Nowadays, that doesn't work for the Lieutenant Perkinses of today, of which there is a Lieutenant Perkins, because we can't say, hey, this is exactly where you're going. In fact, I definitely can't get it down to 1,500 meters. You may go to the Baltics, you may go to the Balkans, you may go to the Mideast, you may go to North Korea. I don't know where you're going. I don't know what the coalition is. I don't know what the ROE is. The only thing I do know is you're not going to recon it every 90 days. So see, once I decided that I'm building an army for an unknown world, I train and develop my leaders completely differently. That's all I need to know. Do I need to develop them to deal with unknown problems and known problems? Because those are two different ways to develop people. Buying equipment. In a known world, you innovate to deliver level of differentiation. Everybody wants to innovate. You deliver innovation by delivering differentiation, which means I know who the enemy is, Soviet Union. I know their tanks, T-55. I'm just going to differentiate from it. We've got it at Fort Knox. We're shooting at it. We know it's ballistic protection. So I'm going to differentiate and build an M1. Now, when you differentiate, when you design a system to deliver differentiation, it generally takes a long time, a lot of R&D, very expensive, exquisite weapon systems, but you're willing to take that chance because you know what the enemy is, and you know how long the Soviets take to improve their tanks, so as long as you stay ahead, you're good to go. The problem we have now is we can't focus on differentiation because we don't know who to differentiate against. It's unknown. So when I was growing up, all T-72s were bad. You had the little cards, your enemy vehicles, T-72, bad, shoot it. The problem is now we have T-72s in NATO. And quite honestly, we've sold M1s to some people that, when the balloon goes up, I'm not sure what side of the LD they're going to be on. So we may have to differentiate against our own stuff. So see, in a known world, differentiation doesn't work. In an unknown world. What you have to do in an unknown world is you innovate to deliver a high rate of innovation. Rate of innovation is more important than level of differentiation. I've got to be able to turn things quicker. Each increment may not be as big a differentiation, but it's kind of like when you get a new iPhone, iPhone 4, iPhone 5, iPhone 6. That's how you deal with the future. So we've got to change the Army from delivering differentiation to increasing the rate of innovation. How quickly can we get stuff out in the field? How quickly can a soldier take what he has, adapt and use what he has and use it differently based on the situation? So the challenge is, when was our acquisition system put in place? All the laws and regulations written? During the Cold War, right? So what was the system designed to do? Deliver differentiation, which is what? Takes a long time, very expensive, et cetera. So when everyone lambasts acquisition system, I don't know if there's any acquisition folks in here and all that, all I say is, hey, give them a break. The system is delivering exactly what it was designed to do. It was built for a different world. So when people say, we've got to improve the system, I say, no, we don't. We've got to get rid of it. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for the world we have. We need a new system to increase rate of innovation, which is why I spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill and talking to congressmen and senators. We got to change the laws. We got to do this. We're trying to literally redesign the system to deliver a high rate of innovation because I don't know what the future brings. I just know it's going to change very quickly. So it's really coming up with a completely different set of metrics than the metrics I grew up with. So that's what I'm focusing on. How do I change an Army that is based on delivering differentiation to an Army that's based on a high rate of innovation, which means I need to have critical thinkers. I need to have adaptive leaders. I need to have people that are empowered to exploit the initiative. All the things that are up there. Great questions. What else?
Sir?
Yeah.
Captain Schneider, MCCE. Sergeant Major, this one's more targeted towards you, and sir, absolutely.
Oh, he can have it. He can have it, especially if it's hard.
This has to deal with the schools and the PME for young junior leaders, especially our junior enlisted and our senior NCOs. How do we send those folks to the PME? I know that our current op tempo, at least for where I'm coming from, was a little high, and it was seen as kind of a disadvantage to send those folks to PME during our very high op tempos. How do we, as kind of company commanders, young platoon leaders coming up, how do we alleviate that and kind of make sure that they get where they need to go?
Yes, sir. So when we started looking at that backlog that I talked about and really started shaping the STEP policy, we quickly realized that HRC couldn't do it alone. And that's what they were trying to do. Quite honestly, when a non-commissioned officer was, the way they got scheduled for school was based on points where they were on this massive OML. And if something came up like a gunnery or something like that, they just didn't come out and went to the next class. They came all the way out and went to the bottom and would have to work their way up. Op-tempo really would kill that non-commissioned officer. So we realized there's three things that we had to do. First, we had to attack the backlog, those 14,000. So that's priority number one. Those soldiers in that backlog, 3 or more years, has received a school date as of now, scheduled. And they are scheduled to attend PME both in AC schools and our National Guard schools. So one of the things as you go down to take command, where the active duty soldier gets PME for 11 Bravo ALC at Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. That's not an error. They're going to Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, same POI, same instructors, same level of certification. So we had to get at the backlog. The second group is those after 1 January selected for promotion. Because once they're selected for promotion, they get on a clock for 18 months. And if in 18 months they can't make it to PME, they get removed from the promotion standing list, whether it's from specialist to sergeant or sergeant first class to master sergeant. Because don't forget that we've added 2 more courses. We've added the master leader course for sergeant first class to master sergeant, and we established the executive leader course for those sergeants major selected to work for a general officer. Those are called nominative sergeants major. So backlog, those affected by STEP, and the last one I think is really what you're getting at, and that is the train ahead population, priority number 3. Okay, we want to hear from the commands that say, all right, we know Davenport can't go to school in the fall, but right now is a key opportunity. And so we're allowing the commands to say, this is a time to go. Now, the deferments. We understand life happens. And so if a non-commissioned officer needs to be deferred, the deferment is signed by the first general officer in the chain of command. And the reason for that is no longer just saying Davenport can't make it to class 0316, but he can make it to 0716. And so immediately once that memo gets up to HRC, Davenport gets locked in for 0716. So we want to hear from the commands. We want you all to have input in getting our soldiers to school. But I will tell you the number one thing is height, weight, APFT. That's where you can really help us. And making sure if you're going to do the train ahead, it happened right here at Fort Benning, Georgia. A great staff sergeant was fast tracking in our Army and was a walk-on, priority 3 into ALC. Had been in Army, I think 4 years, been in grade maybe a year. But he failed how to fill out a DA Form 6. He failed that course, that module, and so that test. And so he failed to meet course standards. And so when that came to my attention, I couldn't believe from the Force Comm Sergeant Major that first of all, that we were teaching how to fill out DA Form 6 nowadays. Because I challenge if we go to any else future orderly rooms, we'll find a red and blue pencil like we grew up with. There's some app or automation for it now. But because that NCO's chain of command rushed to get them into the course, he didn't have the experience ready to handle the course. So it's both physical fitness and experience level.
Yeah, so actually that's a great question because it's actually indicative of a number of things. And I would even boil it down to something more similar to that. It is about leadership and focusing on folks, thinking long-term, et cetera, and understanding that it's not just all about, your NTC rotation or whatever it is, and you've got to have a plan. And so one of the things when you are a leader, Sergeant Major talked about already, when you are in charge of an organization, there's a million things you want to have. I want to get people to school. I want to do this. You've got to come up with forcing functions. It can't just be, I think it's just going to self-actualize and happen by itself. You literally have to come up with a forcing function, whether it's timelines, et cetera, et cetera. So when I first got out to Leavenworth, we had Command General Staff College, at that time ILE, and it was Universal ILE. We've since changed that, but anyways. But we had a huge backlog of people that had not gone to it. Because it gets back to the deferment thing, we had like 500 lieutenant colonels that had pinned on that were not MEL 4, they hadn't gone to CGSC, and we had 5,500 people backlogged. 5,500 majors that hadn't gone through it. Why? Because everybody's deferring them, because I got to go to, I got to go to NTC, I got to go here, and so the command that owned them, like their thing that was going on was obviously more important than the professional development of this major. So I got with the Chief of Staff of the Army and we made a bunch of changes, but one of them was, so you can put out all the ALAREX you want and all that kind of stuff. What we did, it's similar to what the Sergeant Major talked about, is we changed the level of deferment authority. And now in the Army, if you are a major and you are selected for Command and General Staff College, the first person in the Army that can defer you is the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army. That's the first person, and you can appeal it from there. Okay, so the first year we put that into place. The year before when I was out there, we had 400 majors that were deferred. Do you know how many we had after we changed the role to the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army? 4. And they actually were in Afghanistan, so it sort of made sense. So all we did was come up with a forcing function. And a miracle, somehow the 400 that couldn't get in, when they're like, well, you can defer it, just go get an office call with the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army. I don't know, for some reason it just worked. So, because it's just about priorities. It's about thinking this thing through, et cetera, like that. So I got to tell you, you don't, as you're going through your professional development and your promotion timelines, you don't want your stuff to get deferred, yet sometimes we don't pay attention to everybody else. So you got to have a plan. You got to sit down. Who are all the soldiers in my company or platoon? What's the plan? When are we going to gunnery? When are we going to the CTC? When are we doing X, Y, and Z? When can they go, et cetera, like that? If you don't do that, it will just not happen. And it's a problem, hence all the deferments. So what we do, what we're doing at the senior leader level of the Army, we're trying to help you out here, folks. We're pulling the deferment level away from you because it's a forcing function. Because now, guess what? I mean, that poor major, the brigade commander goes, well, you could go to CGSC and take a knee, or you can go to NTC with us, but it's up to you. You decide. Well, what do you think the major's going to say to his senior rater? Okay, so now, boom, we pull that away from you. And so, again, that's mission command, because mission command had nothing to do with micromanagement. It's about understanding the problem, okay, and getting to a position of relative advantage. And so we're seeing our deferments go way down, but we need your help on that.
And if I may, just real quickly, another way you can help is at the semi-centralized promotion boards, the CO1s or alpha, whatever they're called nowadays. They're CO1s in our days, where the first sergeant comes in and say, hey, sir, ma'am, sign here, and you all make the recommendations. Davenport should or should not go to the board. We are only promoting 19% of the fully eligible specialists to sergeant, 19%. 81% that's not being recommended are fully eligible. You start peeling back the onion on why they're not being recommended, and you find things that, like you didn't go to the company pre-battalion board, or you didn't score 290 or above on your APFT, or I need more time to evaluate you. That is causing a problem as well. And with sergeant to staff sergeant, it's not much better. Only 41% of those fully eligible, done nothing wrong, meeting all the Army standards, are being recommended for promotion. So if you want sergeants in your formation, squad leaders, staff sergeants, tank commanders, they're there. And what you have to do is identify that talent and get it recommended for the board. If they're not meeting a standard, then take appropriate action to get them out of our Army.
Great questions. What other questions?
Sir, Captain McCullough, MCCC.
Okay, you and then you next. Okay.
I'm coming here from 2CR in Germany. And got
from ABOLC.
Yes, sir, and got the opportunity to do some multinational rotation.
Right, yeah, General Hodges is all over Europe with his guys.
Yes, sir. I was wondering, from a TRADOC standpoint, your experience and Sergeant Major's experience in Europe, what ways can we rapidly create situational understanding with multinational as well as joint interagency partners, sir? Yeah,
so this is one of the things, having spent 14 years in Europe, and I commanded a battalion at ABOLC. My first one-star job was JMTC at Grafenwehr, so I have a fondness for that area. That is one of the concerns we have, that because when I was growing up in the Cold War, we had like 350,000 soldiers in Europe, almost the size of the Army today is what we had in Europe. So people were very used to living in a foreign environment and working there. And of course, then we had Iraq and Afghanistan where people are immersed in it. So as we are becoming a CONUS-based organization with, we think, less people in Iraq and Afghanistan, one of our concerns is people won't have that experience to be in a multinational environment. So we're doing a number of things. One of the things that we're doing is you have multinational folks right here in your class. So what we have found during periods when we become a CONUS-based organization, there's generally two ways. One is PME. And so we're increasing the number of folks we send to foreign schools and hopefully bringing a like number of increased folks over here, number one. Number two is exercises. So we have the Army Warfighting Assessment and the NIE out at Fort Bliss, and we are bringing in a number of multinational partners to do that. So next year, AWA 17 is focusing on the Pacific. So General Brooks is the USER PAC guy, has Pacific Pathways, and so we're working with any number of countries in the Pacific to tie them in to what we're doing with our exercises at Fort Bliss. So what we're trying to do is really both through PME and our exercise program and experimentation is bring in our multinational partners. Sergeant Major and I just came from Fort Leavenworth, both at Fort Leavenworth and Fort Eustis, my headquarters. We have a number of foreign liaison officers there. At Fort Leavenworth, they have 88 countries represented. A lot of them are trying to get into our doctrine, look at our doctrine and figure it out. Sergeant Major and I meet regularly with our foreign liaison officers at Fort Eustis as they're trying to design their army. So we're working at the institutional level as well. But then at the personal level, what you can do is first of all, when you're at institutions like this, there's a lot of foreign folks here. Get to know them, develop relationships with them, talk to them, exercise your self-development domain, follow up on stuff. We're doing the regionally aligned forces where we deploy people around the world. Part of what we're doing that is not only to develop a relationship with that combatant commander, but to take young lieutenants and captains and non-commissioned officers and give you a chance to rotate to different parts of the world. Not that you'll become an expert in that part of the world, but we want you to be prepared to know how to get inculcated into a different society, understand the role of culture and language. So that's one of the reasons we have RAF, not to make that brigade or that battalion expert in that part of the world, but as a leader development tool to have people used to going to different parts of the world and getting outside their comfort zone. Questions? I guess what did we got? One last official question? Is always going to have the last official. Oh, well, yeah, yes, sir. Yeah, right here. And then, well, okay, we'll get you back there.
Sir, Sergeant Major, this question might apply to both of you, but it's to do with forcing functions as it pertains to developing others. So two key things that have changed, the requirement to have 360-degree surveys for NCOERs and OERs,
right,
and also the forms themselves with the accompanying support forms and how we're supposed to do counselings. Do you see a need for higher level forcing functions to ensure that we use both of those properly at the company level for E7s, E8s, and then for lieutenants and captains as well, especially?
Yeah, Sergeant Major, I'll let you ask the NCO piece.
Well, I've been a part of the NCOER working group for 2 years. And when we first started out the NCOER, we were thinking through how we could leverage automation to match up to counseling. We even had an excursion on when you did the counseling and you met face-to-face. Once you put in the CAT card, it would populate the date, so you couldn't go back and backdate. And then we got in discussion about the 360s, and we really want that for self-awareness, and we don't know if we really wanted to populate that. But it gets down to just, again, where the leather meets the road, is that monthly counseling. If you are doing quality monthly counseling with your subordinates, all of that kind of shakes out. And I think we'll really see the results of the new NCOER in the June or July, the first board. Some senior sergeant majors will be there with the board and see how they interpreted the form. So we did look at it, but we opted to keep the form as a report to the board, so they didn't see all the stuff underneath the water, and trust that non-commissioned officers and officers were going to get at counseling.
So sort of in the spirit of mission command, I do talk about forcing functions, but the forcing functions I prefer to focus on are the ones at my level that I impose. In other words, I'm not really interested. In other words, if my boss has to have a forcing function on me, that's what you call an indicator. You know, if General Miller goes, I got to get something to get Perkins to do what he's supposed to do, I'm thinking, okay, we need to do a reassessment there. So the forcing function really is your leadership, okay? So here are the company commanders that are going to have these lieutenants as platoon leaders. So the best forcing function are the company commanders saying, hey, Lieutenant, have you done your counseling, the NCOs, et cetera, like that? And here are the NCOs over here, okay? They're going to work for the lieutenants that are going to have other NCOs below them. So I'm kind of hoping that I don't need big army to come down and micromanage you, because generally, when I was a company commander, I used to tell folks, hey, here's the deal, and I had a great battalion commander. My goal is not for battalion to think they have to come down and help me, okay? Commander Bravo Company, I'm like, if they want to help somebody, let them go to Charlie Company. So my goal always was make sure nobody thinks Perkins needs help, that we'll kind of take care of ourselves. So it's all in your hands, okay? I got the company commanders, I got the lieutenants, I got the non-commissioned officers. This is where the rubber meets the road. It's just, it takes discipline and commitment, and you become your own forcing function. You kind of replicate it. You just sort of have to get up. It's kind of like PME. How do we make sure people go to school? You know how to make sure you go to school? You send them there. That's how they get there. Okay, other questions? I think, was there one over here? Right. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Captain Connell with MCCC. As the last question, I'll try to keep it to a simple yes or no.
Okay.
But, is there a plan to do with the 1,001 different digital systems that our Army uses to organize and report the mountain of data that we like to report up, similar with what you did with the doctrine, to say like a cloud-based system with a company that maybe has a mission statement of organizing data simply and efficiently?
Yes. Next question. No, okay, so yeah, that is a big focus of ours. And one of the things, I was down at Fort Gordon last week, which is our cyber center, and yesterday I was at the Mission Command Center of Excellence at Fort Leavenworth, that is the proponent for our mission command systems. And that's probably the #1 thing we're focusing on. One of the reasons, actually, I was in Silicon Valley last week. One of the reasons, actually, I was at Google, because they have the Google Cloud on that, is we're trying to get around. See, the problem is we don't understand what the mission command systems are for. It's a great question, a great last question, because it brings me back to my first thing, okay? Because you know what we do? We focus on what the mission command systems do. We focus on what they do. And my little box provides this data, my little box provides this data, my little box provides this data. No, that's what they do. They provide data. You know what they're for? To develop understanding, right? Mission command, understand, visualize, describe. Throw up the mission command slide, please. So you might notice we start up here, unified land operations. You conduct unified land operations. You execute mission command to conduct unified land operations. At the very bottom of the mission command systems, the ones you talk about, was it 1,001, I think is the number? You've counted them up? Okay, it's about that. You probably missed a couple. So here's the 1,001 systems. It's by no accident they're at the bottom of the slide, because they're the least important part of this. The problem is when we focus on them exclusively and we think what they do is the end in of themselves, they actually move up to the top here, not doctrinally, but in reality, and then everything's got to adjust to support them. So I tell all my friends that are proponents for mission command systems, of which I'm about to meet them here shortly, no, don't tell me what you do. I'm going to tell you what you're for. What you are for is to provide understanding to the commander. So if you have this great box that does all kinds of things, but it doesn't plug into this other box, it doesn't help me understand what's going on. But sir, it does great things. It stands on its head. It does holograms, everything. I'm like, I don't care what it does. It's not accomplishing what it's for. It's not providing me a visualization of the battlefield. That's what it's for. Your system is going to plug in with all the other systems. It's got to be intuitive. It's got to provide clarity. So it provides me, a dumbass tanker, visualization of a very complex battlefield so that I understand what to direct. That's what it's for. So don't tell me what the box does. I really don't care what it does. I don't care if it's full of magic, okay? But if it provides a great visualization, I'm buying one. So this is where we went awry. This is exactly where we went awry, because we developed technical performance parameters for things. We developed technical performance parameters for things. We bought things. We forgot what capability they are for. And therefore, we did not look at it as a system. We looked at it as a list of things by separate proponents out there. And so I'm working on it, okay? One of the problems is, how much money do you think we have invested in a bunch of things that don't know what they're for? Billions. Billions of dollars of sunk costs. Now, if you are economic majors, they'll tell you you don't consider sunk costs for future investment, but in the Army we do, okay, because we get oversight by Congress and stuff like that. And this is a great example of what happens when you don't figure out what you're for before you start doing stuff. So the great Americans were out there buying all these boxes. They were doing stuff, running cables, all that kind of stuff. They never knew what they were for. They thought, what I have to do is provide data. No, you don't. What you have to do is you've got to provide clarity of understanding of the problem set out there. So we're working it. We're working it. I'm glad you asked that question because good to get that off my chest. So that was the official last question. So I'm going to wrap up with one last thing here. And that is really the essence of what this is all about. And if you go to the last slide there. So I told you, because of the unknown world out there, the unpredictability and the constant changing nature of it, I want you to conduct unified land operations, which is seize, retain, exploit the initiative to always be in a position of relative advantage. To be able to conduct unified land operations, you must execute mission command, which means I want you to empower the initiative via understand, visualize, describe, direct, lead, and assess. To run an organization via mission command, you must have a professional organization. It must be a professional organization. Because if you have an ill-trained, ill-equipped, ill-led organization, you do not empower it, you control it. When I go around the Army and I see what I would consider as a very micromanaged, highly controlled organization, I generally say, I bet that is not a professional organization. I bet that leader is not a professional leader. They probably are not well trained and well led. That's what the conclusion I come to when I see a micromanaged, highly centralized, controlled organization. I say it's not that professional, okay? Because you have to have a professional organization to empower it. And this is the key, really, to your profession. So some people, well, Army profession, isn't that like 350-1 mandatory training? Every quarter I could do 2 hours Army profession. Army profession is not mandatory training. It's the essence of who you are. And this was made clear to me by someone who's not even in the Army. In fact, someone who's not even American. So I was a division commander in a part of the world in combat, commanding a division in combat. I had a counterpart, actually senior to me, outranked me, and been there a couple of months. And we're going around, and it's at lunchtime, and we're doing sort of the type A American officer thing. Hey, we gotta do this and combined arms this and we transition this and do all that. And finally, my counterpart, apparently I had reached the official good idea cutoff point. He stopped me and goes, hey, stop, General. He says, stop. He says, I've been watching you here, command your infantry division here for a couple of months. And he says, you know what? He says, you take being a general officer in the United States Army for granted. You take being a general for granted. And I said, what, you're questioning the effectiveness of a promotion system that would select somebody like me to be a general? I said, well, get in line. So he said, no, I'm not saying that. He says, I just watch how you operate. And he said, you go down to first brigade, and you tell them to do something, and you don't worry that when you leave, they're going to start a coup. You go to 3rd Brigade, you give them new MRAPs. You don't worry about when you leave, they're going to sell the MRAPs on the black market. You go talk to the command sergeant major and you give him guidance, so you don't worry about that when you leave, he's going to call his cousin that's in the MOD and get you fired because you upset him or something like that. He says, you just blindly trust everybody. Perkins, you are so naive. If you were in my Army, we would eat you for lunch. You are such a naive person because you just trust that people are going to do what you tell them to do. And I paused for a moment. I'm thinking, he's absolutely right. I mean, I don't worry about 1st Brigade starting a coup. I don't worry about 3rd Brigade selling their MRAPs. 4th Brigade, I keep my eye on, but I have my reasons, okay? What he was saying is, you don't understand the environment that I'm operating in. So you're just this naive person that flies around in this fancy helicopter, just trusting that everything goes along. He says, and I've been watching your unit, and they actually seem to be sort of a self-correcting unit. That when a private doesn't know what he's doing or doing the right thing, the sergeant kind of comes in and squares him away. Or if there's a lieutenant not sure about something, the captain or the major comes in and helps him. And so when something's not going right, other people in the unit come in and police the unit. They are stewards of it and get it headed in the right track. And again, Perkins, you are nowhere to be found. He says, I don't really know what you do, Perkins. You don't really do too much. Okay? Because you trust everybody, so you don't seem to be controlling people. You tell them what to do. You rarely come back and check on it. If something that's not going well, then all of a sudden their unit self-corrects itself. He says, you don't understand, in my Army, if something's not going well, if I don't go down there personally, it's not going to get fixed. He says, that's the Army I am. He says, so Perkins, he says, you know what? You have a big problem. You have a crutch. You lean on this every day. What he's saying is, I have a sense that, you know what? If you didn't have one of these, I don't think you'd be a very good general. You know what? He's absolutely right. He says there's something else about your soldiers as well, is they have a sense of something larger than themselves. Their focus is not to let their fellow soldiers down. Their focus is not to do something that would bring dishonor on their unit. They would never think of laying down their weapons and running, because that would dishonor their unit. It would let their buddies down. It would destroy their esprit de corps. So what he was saying is, Perkins, you know what? You're just not that good. Because, you know, if I had one of these, anybody could command an American infantry division. If you got people like this, if they're that professional, and oh, by the way, your people seem to know what they're doing. They really seem to know what they're doing. They listen to the command sergeant major, and they are experts not only in their weapon systems, but in their tactics and techniques. In fact, he said, it wasn't because that's a picture there, but he says, I was up north, and it was an artillery unit, and the artillery unit was conducting coin operations one day, and the next day, they switched right over, and they were firing howitzers over dismounted infantrymen and a combined arms line fire. So they went from counterinsurgency, which is very complex, to the next day shooting artillery over dismounted infantrymen. Again, Perkins, you were nowhere to be found. They went one complicated task to another one. In fact, there were hardly any officers there. It was almost all non-commissioned officers and soldiers. He says, the thing that really gets me, though, is this. He says, where do you get these soldiers that'll travel thousands of miles away from home and possibly give their lives for people they don't even know, when I can't even get my own army to defend their own country? So he says, Perkins, I don't need you to lecture me about do this, do that, etc., like that, because you take all of this for granted. And you know what? He was absolutely right. He was saying the things you're telling me to do, I can't do. It has nothing to do with training or equipment. It's because I don't have a professional army. I don't have a crutch to lean on like Perkins has a crutch to lean on. As a matter of fact, he said this whole thing was a bait and switched organization. You all came over here and you sold us your stuff. We bought your tanks, we have your Humvees, we have your rifles, we have all your stuff. But the problem is it doesn't do anything. It just sits there in the motor pool and rusts. Why? Because you didn't sell us your profession. And oh, by the way, he realized, you know what, if you go in the FMS catalog, it's not for sale. It's not for sale. We don't sell our profession, because you know where you get it? It's homemade. This is a do-it-yourself project right here. This is a do-it-yourself project. You make it yourself. In fact, we're going on 241 years of building this Army profession that is the envy of the world, that is the secret sauce. It's not the doctrine, it's not our stuff, it's not our organizations, it's not all that. It's really the professionalism of our Army. You start to realize that, and he said, how am I going to get there from here? Because he realized, you know, we've been at this thing for 241 years. As I always remind folks, the birthday of the United States Army is 14 June 1775. The birthday of the United States of America is 4 July 1776. The United States Army is 1 year older than the United States of America. The Army that you lead in, the Army that your soldiers serve in, is older than the nation they defend, okay? And it's taken us 241 years to get here. And do you know how we got here? We build it soldier by soldier, sergeant by sergeant, lieutenant by lieutenant. That's how you build it. And it took us 241 years to get here. The problem is, you know how quickly you can lose it? Like that. And do you know how you lose it? Soldier by soldier, sergeant by sergeant, lieutenant by lieutenant. So, you know what you are for, non-commissioned officers, company commanders, platoon leaders? You know what you're for? This. You are the steward of this profession. When you get back out to the Army, your platoon, your company, whatever it is, we are going to hand you a 241-year-old do-it-yourself project. We're going to hand you a 241-year-old do-it-yourself project that is the envy of the world. And the part that we're going to hand to you, you are not going to be designing the next tank. You may provide input. You're not going to be designing the next division or anything like that. What you will be doing is you will be a steward of this, which is really the essence of what the Army is all about. So when people talk about the Army profession, it's not mandatory training, it's the essence of what you are. If you lose a sense of professionalism, if you let this thing go down the drain, all hope is lost, okay? But the good news is, as I go around the Army, I come here and other places like that, I think we're going to do just fine for the next 241 years, okay? Because of you all out there. I mean, I'm putting, you talk about, hey, what are you going to do with the budget constraints? What are you going to do with a rapidly changing world? You know what I'm doing? I'm putting all my chips on you all. I'm putting all my chips. The number one priority in the Army is leader development. It's not the next tank. It's not the next budget. It's not force structure or anything like that. The number one priority in the Army is you, because what you are is you are responsible for the secret sauce of the United States Army. That's what you're for. So when you're out there in unity, say, what am I for? The first question you should ask, am I a good steward of this profession that is the essence of who we are, that is not for sale, and everyone else realizes that that is the envy of the world. Hey, folks, thanks for what you do. It's an honor to serve with you, and God bless. Carry on, guys. Carry on.